We were best friends since childhood. Then he met her. The wedding invitation arrived, but something felt off as I stood in that church. He grabbed my arm and whispered 5 words that changed everything. Please don't let this happen. His fiancée was already walking down the aisle. Before I tell you what happened next, hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy real-life drama that will leave you speechless. Trust me, you won't believe how this ends. Some friendships are just written in the stars, you know. That's how it was with Ethan and me. We met when I was 7 and he was 8, back when summer days stretched on forever and our biggest worry was who got to be player 1 on the video games. His mom used to joke that we were practically sewn together at the hip, 20 years of friendship filled with inside jokes that no one else understood, of midnight phone calls during our worst moments, of promises that we'd always be there for each other. Ethan was always the one with the plan. While I was daydreaming, he was plotting our next adventure. We built tree houses that collapsed after 2 days, started a neighborhood business washing cars that lasted only 1 weekend, and once tried to dig to China in his backyard until his dad found the 3-foot hole we'd managed to create. Every memory I have from growing up has Ethan somewhere in the frame, his crooked smile and those eyes that could never hide when he was lying. When high school came, we survived the awkward years together. When college separated us for the first time, we still called every Sunday night without fail. When my dad died during sophomore year, Ethan drove 8 hours straight to be there for the funeral. And when his first serious girlfriend broke his heart, I was the one who showed up at his apartment with a bottle of whiskey and a willingness to listen to the same sad stories all night. That's what makes this story so hard to tell. When you know someone that completely, when you've seen them at their highest and lowest points, you notice when they start to disappear. I watched it happen slowly with Ethan, like watching someone get pulled away by an invisible current. I saw the changes before he did. I felt the warning signs, like a storm brewing on the horizon. But I never imagined it would lead us to that moment in the church with his desperate whisper in my ear and the weight of 20 years of friendship hanging in the balance. Sometimes I wonder if I should have seen it coming sooner, if I should have said something before we ended up with me standing beside him at that altar watching his life nearly derail before my eyes. But then again, how do you tell your best friend that the person they think they love is slowly destroying them? How do you make that call? I guess that's why I'm sharing this story now. Because sometimes the hardest choice is the right one, and sometimes saving someone means risking everything. This is what happened when my best friend invited me to his wedding and then begged me to stop it. Ethan and I grew up on the same street in a neighborhood where everyone knew each other's business. We bonded over Star Wars action figures and a shared hatred of Brussels sprouts. I was the quiet kid with too many thoughts. He was all energy and impulsive decisions. Somehow, we balanced each other perfectly. Our elementary school years blurred together in a montage of bike rides, scraped knees, and promises made in our secret hideout behind the old Thompson garage. We swore blood oaths with safety pins that barely broke the skin, convinced we were brothers in every way that mattered. High school should have separated us. Ethan joined the baseball team while I fell in with the theater crowd. But every Friday night, no matter what, we'd meet at the 24-hour diner on Main Street and split a plate of cheese fries. College applications, first heartbreaks, family drama. We processed it all over those greasy potatoes, solving each other's problems until the waitress would finally kick us out at 2 a.m. When we left for different colleges, him for engineering at State, me for journalism across the country, people assumed we'd drift apart. But distance just made us more intentional. We'd send each other care packages during finals week, random texts with inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else, and those Sunday night calls became sacred, a ritual neither of us ever broke. After graduation, Ethan landed his dream job at an architecture firm downtown while I bounced between writing gigs. He bought his first condo. I was still figuring out how to keep my houseplants alive. But through every life stage, every triumph and setback, we remained constants in each other's lives. That's why I noticed immediately when things started to change. Because when you've memorized someone's laugh, their silences speak volumes too. I met someone. 3 simple words Ethan texted me last October after a string of short-lived relationships and dates that ended in funny stories rather than second meetings. I was genuinely thrilled for him. He deserved someone great. When he called later that night, his voice had that rare quality of restrained excitement. Her name is Vanessa. She's different. Different how? I wondered, but I was just happy to hear that spark in his voice again. 3 weeks later, Ethan insisted we meet for lunch. Vanessa was coming, and her approval of me apparently mattered. I arrived early at our usual spot, but they were already there, Ethan's arm draped around a woman with perfect posture and a calculated smile. Something flickered in her eyes when Ethan introduced me as his oldest friend, not warmth, but assessment. Throughout lunch, Vanessa dominated the conversation, interrupting Ethan whenever he started sharing our old stories. That's cute, she'd say dismissively before steering the topic back to her promotion or her recent trip to Milan. Ethan watched her with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of admiration and, was that anxiety? The changes came rapidly after that. Ethan started missing our weekly hangouts. His texts became sporadic. When we did meet, he checked his phone constantly, always with the explanation, Vanessa's waiting for me. At his birthday dinner, Ethan announced they were moving in together after just 3 months. When I raised an eyebrow, he whispered, when you know, you know. But the Ethan I knew never rushed into anything. 6 months into their relationship, Ethan called at midnight. My heart leapt, thinking he'd finally opened his eyes. Instead, his voice trembled with a different emotion. She said yes. We're getting married in the spring. I forced excitement into my voice even as dread settled in my stomach. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, heavy cream cardstock with gold foil lettering announcing the union of Jacob William Mitchell and Vanessa and Caldwell. Inside was a handwritten note from Ethan. Hope you'll stand beside me on the big day. Need my best person there. I traced my finger over his familiar handwriting, remembering how we once joked about being each other's best man someday. But this didn't feel like that childhood promise. This felt wrong. 2 days later, Ethan called to confirm I had received it. Vanessa wanted a small wedding party, he explained, but I insisted I be part of it. The way he said it, as if he'd won some negotiation, made my skin crawl. When had my presence in his life become something to negotiate? At the bachelor party, a subdued dinner rather than the road trip we'd always planned, Ethan seemed distracted. After his third whiskey, he pulled me aside on the restaurant's balcony. Do you ever wonder if the decisions you make today are going to ruin your life tomorrow? He asked, staring into his glass. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed with Vanessa's name. He immediately straightened his posture and walked away to answer. The rehearsal dinner was worse. Ethan's parents, who had always welcomed everyone with warm hugs, were stiff and formal. His mother pulled me aside while Ethan was busy. He doesn't laugh anymore, she whispered, her eyes darting toward Vanessa, who was directing the catering staff with military precision. Later that night, I passed by the venue's garden and heard heated voices. You're embarrassing me in front of everyone, Vanessa hissed. Ethan's response was too quiet to hear, but his apologetic tone carried through the darkness. I stood frozen, wondering if I should intervene when Vanessa emerged from around the corner. Seeing me, she instantly transformed, her smile switching on like a light. Everything's perfect, she said cheerfully. Tomorrow will be magical. I didn't sleep that night. Morning arrived with perfect weather and a text from Ethan. Can you come early? I found him alone in a side room of the church, already dressed in his tuxedo but looking like he might be sick. His face was pale, eyes bloodshot. When I asked if he was okay, he forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Just nervous, he said, but his hands trembled as he attempted to fix his boutonniere. I stepped in to help, and that's when I noticed how thin he'd become. His collar hung loose around his neck. This wasn't pre-wedding jitters. This was something else entirely. Ethan, I started carefully. Is this what you want? For a moment, something flashed in his eyes, relief that someone had finally asked, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. Cold feet is normal, right? He deflected, reaching for a flask in his jacket. I'd never seen Ethan drink before noon. His parents arrived shortly after, his mother immediately fussing over his appearance while his father stood awkwardly in the doorway. When Ethan stepped out to speak with the officiant, his father caught my arm. We've tried talking to him, he said quietly. Something's not right with that girl. He's not himself anymore. The church filled quickly with guests I barely recognized, mostly Vanessa's colleagues and friends. Ethan stood at the altar, tugging nervously at his cuffs, eyes fixed on the exit door as if calculating the distance. Then the music started. Everyone rose as the doors opened to reveal Vanessa in an elaborate gown, her smile triumphant as she surveyed the crowd. She took her first step down the aisle, and that's when it happened. Ethan's fingers dug into my arm with desperate strength, his face close to mine. He whispered words that chilled me to the bone. "Please don't let this happen." His eyes were wide with genuine fear. "Please help me." Time seemed to freeze. Ethan's desperate whisper hung between us while the wedding march played on. My heart hammered against my ribs as memories flashed through my mind. Vanessa checking Ethan's phone when he left the table, the way he'd stopped expressing opinions around her, how he'd canceled plans with his family when she decided they had better things to do. I looked at Vanessa gliding down the aisle, her smile never reaching her eyes, then back at Ethan, my best friend of 20 years, silently begging me to rescue him from a mistake he couldn't voice himself. My palms went slick with sweat. My mouth dried up. What right did I have to interfere? What if I was wrong? But what if I wasn't? 200 guests watched, oblivious to the crisis unfolding. The officiant smiled encouragingly. Ethan's parents exchanged worried glances, and Ethan looked like a man facing execution. I thought about what I'd want someone to do for me if I were trapped in a relationship I couldn't escape. How many times had Ethan been there when I needed him? 20 years of friendship weighed against social propriety and the chaos that would follow. Vanessa was halfway down the aisle now. 15 more seconds and she'd reach us. 10 seconds to decide whether to speak or stay silent. 5 seconds to choose between friendship and convention. I felt a strange calm settle over me. With perfect clarity, I knew what I had to do. I stepped forward, placing myself between Ethan and his approaching bride. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "I'm sorry, but this wedding needs to stop." The music screeched to a halt. Vanessa froze mid-step. 200 gasps filled the church, and behind me, I heard Ethan exhale, a sound of pure relief. There was no going back now. Chaos erupted. Vanessa's face contorted with fury as she lunged forward, her perfect composure shattered. "What is this?" she shrieked. Her father stood up, demanding explanations. Guests murmured in shocked confusion. Ethan stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. "I can't do this, Vanessa." The words seemed to physically cost him, but once they were out, something shifted in his posture. He stood taller. We ended up in the pastor's office while guests milled about in confusion. Vanessa's mask completely slipped as she hurled accusations at both of us. "You planned this humiliation," she hissed, turning on Ethan. "After everything I've done to fix you." That's when Ethan finally told the truth. How Vanessa had isolated him from friends and family, criticized his every decision, checked his phone while he slept, and convinced him he was lucky she tolerated his many flaws. How she'd threatened self-harm if he ever left her. Ethan's parents cried as they heard what their son had been enduring. "Why didn't you tell us?" his mother asked. Ethan's answer broke my heart. "I thought no one would believe me. Men don't talk about these things." The following weeks were brutal. Vanessa spread vicious rumors. Some mutual friends took sides. Ethan had to move back with his parents temporarily when she refused to leave their apartment. He started therapy, uncovering just how deeply the emotional abuse had affected him. But I also saw my friend return, slowly, cautiously. The first time he laughed without immediately looking over his shoulder was a victory. The first time he made a decision, without second-guessing himself, felt monumental. I kept waiting for someone to notice. He told me one night months later, "Thank you for seeing what I couldn't say." Not everyone understood our actions that day, but Ethan was free. That was all that mattered. 1 year after the wedding that wasn't, Ethan and I sat on his new apartment's balcony, watching the sunset. He looked like himself again, eyes clear, smile genuine, the haunted expression long gone. His therapy had evolved from crisis management to growth, and he'd recently started mentoring other men escaping toxic relationships. "Got something to show you," he said, sliding an envelope across the table. Inside was a letter from Vanessa's former roommate. She had reached out to apologize for not warning Ethan, revealing that Vanessa had targeted him specifically after discovering his family's financial status. She'd even found Vanessa's journal outlining her plans to access Ethan's inheritance after marriage. "You didn't just stop a wedding," Ethan said quietly. "You saved my life in every way that matters." We learned Vanessa had moved across the country and was already engaged to another man, a wealthy doctor who had no idea what was coming. Ethan anonymously sent him the roommate's letter and journal excerpts. The engagement ended 2 weeks later. As for me, I changed too. I paid closer attention to the subtle shifts in friends' behavior, the quiet cries for help people don't always verbalize. I'd learned that sometimes the bravest thing is to speak uncomfortable truths, even when it costs you. Ethan's parents had us over for dinner monthly now. His mother hugged me extra tight each time, whispering thank yous I no longer needed to hear. "Think you'll ever try dating again?" I asked him that evening. Ethan smiled, looking thoughtful rather than pained. "Eventually, but I'm enjoying rediscovering myself first." He raised his glass to friendship that sees the truth even when we can't. We clinked glasses as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting everything in a warm golden light. Some people have asked me if I regret stepping in that day, if I ever wonder whether I should have minded my own business and let Ethan make his own mistakes. The answer is always no. Sometimes love means having the courage to stand between someone you care about and disaster, even when it's messy, even when it makes you the villain in someone else's story. I've learned that abuse doesn't always leave visible bruises. It can happen to anyone, strong people, smart people, people you'd never expect to become victims. And it's not always easy to spot from the outside. But if something feels wrong with someone you love, pay attention. That instinct exists for a reason. Ethan is dating again now, cautiously but optimistically. He's learned to recognize the red flags he once ignored. As for Vanessa, we heard she's tried the same pattern with 2 more partners since Ethan. Some people never change. But others, like my best friend, can heal and grow stronger than before. I'm sharing this story because I know there are people watching right now who sense something isn't right in a relationship, either their own or someone they care about. Trust that feeling. Have those difficult conversations. Be brave enough to speak up or reach out for help. You never know whose life you might be saving. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and notification bell to hear more real-life dramas that will keep you on the edge of your seat. And if you've ever faced that impossible moment, the kind where you had to choose between staying silent or stepping in to protect someone you love, share your story in the comments. Because sometimes, what someone out there needs most is to know they're not the only one. Thank you for being here. And remember, the most important promises we ever keep are often the ones we never actually say out loud. The ones made in silence, in fear, in love, when we decide to fight for someone who might not even know they need saving. If this story touched something in you, don't just keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tell us in the comments, have you ever made a silent promise to protect someone you love? We're listening.